Namaskar to everyone and a very, very warm welcome from the city of Bangalore. I hope everyone is keeping safe and healthy. All our attendees are keeping good care of themselves. It's a lovely weather here in Bangalore. We were just chatting about this, and I keep saying this Saturday after Saturday. 24 degrees, clear sky, clean air. Sun is trying to peek through the clouds a little bit. Nature is looking at its best, and I also want to just reinstate this that whenever we restarting the economies, in fact, we are restarting the economies. Let's also use this moment to think what we value, including reductionist emission and pollution. And, uh, uh, and whenever we're making our economic strategies and opportunities, can this be more resilient, low carbon, prosperous recovery? And I'm a great supporter of the climate, and that's the reason I keep bringing this up week after week. We are in middle of a pandemic, and it is here to stay. Unprecedented COVID-19, and it's impacted everyone in the world. And Pramod was mentioning that each one of us have some or the other impact. Some industries had large impact, some industries have somewhat less, but we all have been impacted. The lockdown was unplanned, this crisis was unprecedented, there was absolutely no playbook, but all the leaders have shown some amazing creativity, fantastic collaboration, and if I could use a word called jugaad, to find ways to make sense of the situation in some way or the other. And I've been chatting with the CEOs and you know uh, a particular group of CEOs, I would say, and they all feel that everyone is focusing on work from home. And I was mentioning about my Coop trip, and I was saying that how the resort was 70% occupied. But having said that, home, but what are we going to work if there is no consumption happening out in the market? You know, Only if when you open the markets, that's when you start seeing, yeah, there is something happening. A lot of countries did a lockdown, and in that period of a lockdown, they went and they put their medical facilities, everything intact, and then they opened down, you know. But what's happening in India is that we're doing a lockdown after lockdown. Even if the shopping mall is open, the 80% people come for theaters, which has no sign of opening up. Understandable. We need to take precautions, but I think it's time to open up and get going. This is my personal view of the economy moving in. I also feel that we missed out a chance with IPL. Moving the IPL to Dubai is probably not doing anything great for this country's economy. Bhavesh is smiling, but I would say that this was here in India, and we would have taken the steps. It could have had the hotels to open up. It could have given a lot of people jobs and livelihoods, etc. I think we lost an opportunity with that. We keep talking about no China, but can we also say no Dubai, India first? That's another my personal viewpoint on here. I have always felt, and today we got some great panels and they're like outstanding financial leaders. So I'm going to touch upon this, my personal perspective here. And I feel that financial professionals lack in the art of storytelling something, you know. They are probably the most intellect people. They have the most depth. They have the most understanding of the business. And it is probably the time for them to become the real heroes, and they are getting right on money, not only preserving the capital, which comes naturally to them, but in these times, they're also managing risk, they're foreseeing risk, they're moving in the agile manner, they're protecting the capital, they're protecting the brand names, which has built for so many years. All the Excel sheets, forecasting, it has all gone for a toss, and every day is a new day, and managing the risk is becoming more and more important. And they have brought new innovative ideas to make this happen. So for me, today, the real hero in any company is probably the CFO of a company. A CEO recently told me that when you when you crush grapes, you get wine, and diamonds are produced under pressure, and olives needs to be pressed to get the best olive oil out of it. And today, probably when we all are feeling crushed and pressed, and we should not get disheartened, because probably there's something best that's going to come out of it. So I'm going to say this to everybody, that hang in there, keep working towards it. Final couple of points, following this global lockdown, global crisis in some way, it has been very stress testing, in today's time. And as we're navigating through this pandemic, financial planning is a center of every organization's short and a medium term decision making. And doing this right certainly needs an enormous effort and the skill set. And at this time, capabilities will need to meet today's expectations. And to discuss this and much more, we have an outstanding panel of leaders. None of them needs any introductions, but Hari has given a very strict guidelines to me to be a bit more professional and do that. So allow me to do this very quickly. We got Manish Dureja. Manish is the founder and CEO of Goals 101. And sorry, we got Milan Naik. My apologies, Milan. Milan is the founder and CEO of Goals 101. And Milan, along with his team, have developed an intelligent data and marketing platform, which enables banks to enhance communication with its customers and uses automation to help its clients improve speed and management of business processes. And they have a global presence today in Africa, Middle East, and Asia. We got Manish Dureja. Manish is the managing director and CEO for Intermiles. He comes with 2 decades of experience across loyalty management, business, and marketing. And I will strongly credit him in rebranding the Jet Privilege as Intermiles. And since the Intermiles has come, he has probably added 500,000 new members. And they have actually changed the entire company from a loyalty program to a consumer technology business. Then we got Pramod Bambani. Pramod is the head of the Regional Finance Center for South Asia for Siemens. Pramod is responsible for governance and operations for treasury, credit management, insurance, and pension management. He manages the in-house advisory practice on structured finance and private equity as well. He has also been managing the M&A and transactions for the group in the past. He's a director on Board of Bangalore of International Airport Limited, and much more to his credit. Then we have Sunil Sanyal, CFO for Nokia Solutions India. Sunil has worked in different facets in the finance function across organizations like Voltas, HCL, Ranbaxy, and Ericsson. And currently he's a CFO for the India region for Nokia Solutions. And then we have Vivek Vadera, Group CFO, Oryx India. Vivek is an experienced finance professional with a demonstrated history of working in financial services, banking, logistics, and telecom. He's skilled in fundraising, business planning, taxation, and risk management. On a lighter side, Sandeep Gambhir, who's the managing director of Oryx, he says that Vivek is in a wrong profession of Munimgiri, and so probably we'll get to know Vivek a little bit more towards the end of the conversation, it might, as Sandeep says so. And to moderate the conversation, we have Bhavesh Gupta. And Bhavesh, firstly, a big congratulations on a new role with Paytm. And Bhavesh joined Paytm Lending as the CEO. And he's a banker with 2 decades of experience, has led the digital transformation journey with some of the top retail banks and NBFCs in the country. And most recently, he served as a founding member and CEO for Clicks Capital, earlier known as GE Capital India. Gentlemen, a very, very warm welcome. And we all are looking forward to an insightful conversation. I will return back at the end of the conversation to know what's happening, or rather I would say, where are you guys spending monies rather than just managing the monies within your organization. And I'll also like to thank Oryx for partnering with us in this series of exciting conversations. And would also like to mention ISIS and Tata Chemicals for their supporting in our initiative. We will also have some polls in between the conversation if Zoom allows that. And I'll request all the audience to spend a little minute to fill those polls too. Bhavesh, welcome again. And
Thank you.
the scene is all yours.
Thank you, Deepak, and good morning, all the panelists, and welcome to all the people who are logged in on this webinar. I'm really privileged to be actually engaging this conversation with the fellow panelists who are very, very successful in domains that they have been and achieved what they have. And I so believe in the next 1 hour or maybe an hour, 15 minutes, we'll have some very interesting stories, we'll have some very interesting conversations and insights, hopefully, that the people who are locked in could take into their context of business or life and really take some leaf out of it from solution perspective. Just to set the context of this conversation, we basically, and I'm sure COVID has been around now for 5 months. It seems as if it's been around for much longer than 5 months. We all have been locked at home. Work from home was earlier seemingly very nice, and people we used to talk about work-life balance. I guess it's now moving to home-work balance because people have very blurred lines between what's work, what's home. I remember in the first about 2 weeks of work from home, people were wearing jackets or whatever they were used to wearing, shaven, and video on. Come third or the fourth week, the jacket kind of moved away to t-shirt. Video was on for some, off for some. Come the second month, at least I can say about myself and the company I belong to, video off. I'm sure shirts became t-shirts, trousers became shorts, or whatever the case may be, and it was fun. And I also remember in the first maybe month or two, you will find kids, young kids, kind of crying or playing, and somebody will come into the video peeping in as to what's happening, what's my dad or mom doing, and people say, no, pitch it up, just no. I'm talking to my boss, and I think 4 months later, it's fine, right? It's fine. It's fine to see kids moving around. It's fine to see things happening behind you. I've seen mothers cooking in the kitchen and talking. I've seen people doing all kinds of stuff. I think it's been terrific. And I hope the same could have been said about economy. I hope the same could be said about businesses. And in financial services that I belong to, it's often said, and I heard this phrase from a very good friend of mine, that growth happens when people buy stuff they don't need with money they don't have, right? Now, unfortunately, the growth is not happening because people don't seem to be buying stuff they don't need. And we all have realized locked up in our homes that we don't need to buy so much of stuff that we were buying pre-COVID. We can live life very simple. We can live life without too much of adventurous spending. And hence, we don't need to borrow money, right? And that's a big, big problem for people like us who only survive by lending money to people to buy stuff. And hence, growth is not happening. But I think the bigger picture that I will dwell upon with fellow panelists very quickly is to really get into 2 or 3 fundamental points of what's happening around us, right? A, what do the panelists believe could be the defining moment of this pandemic, this event, right? This event is nothing which has happened before, right? People talk about 2008, right? I was in the thick of thing in 2008. I don't think this is anywhere close to 2008. It was very financial services specific, but we'll talk a lot about it. B, how are companies pivoting? What are we seeing around us? Where's the disruption happening? Are people really pivoting? Will people really pivot? And C, what could be the changing consumer behavior? And I think that's the pertinent question that I don't think people have got a handle on. People are talking about 8% digital natives becoming 20% digital natives. People are talking about my 80-year-old grandmom or anybody else in my family started to use Facebook or doing digital payments. Is this permanent? Is this temporary? If tomorrow life was normal completely, would this come back to what it was pre-COVID? Or is this change for better? And I think at that note, I would like to quickly start my conversation with fellow panelists by posing the first question to Milind, right? And I think Milind is deeply associated with financial services, right? He's looking at, I hope not very deeply into financial statements of fellow customers. And I hope the data protection kind of puts some level of data protection securities in data. But Milind, what do you think? What are you seeing? Right? Not only in your business, and I would love to see what you think about your business, but tell us, what are you seeing generally in consumer behavior trends pre-COVID and now? And has it changed from April? Has it changed a lot more from June into July? What are you seeing?
Sure, Bhavesh. So, Bhavesh, before I sort of get into specifics in terms of, just in terms of what are we seeing from a data standpoint. So we are, of course, in the space of transaction behavior intelligence. And what we see is anonymized data, which comes in from the banks, and we sort of add more intelligence to it. And of course, from a data protection perspective, GDPR, don't worry, we're all compliant because it's anonymized. But having said that, I think, just wanted to share some insights or thoughts about, where we are right now in this crisis. And I think it's a great topic to really sort of talk about, right? So first and foremost, at a very personal level, I think when people keep talking about unprecedented times, this is all doom and gloom, et cetera, et cetera. I think personally speaking, and I've seen a lot of people sort of, more or less adopt some of these philosophies, is the fact that while all of that's happening, I think never have any one of us get an opportunity to spend enough and more quality time with our family and loved ones, right?
Agreed.
Spending a lot more of that. I think all of us are fortunate enough to have 3 square meals and make sure that we are providing for our family as well. I think there's a lot of things which are green shoots of this current crisis, which is giving us again, I think it's also the spirit of human spirit of resilience, right? How do we sort of bounce back?
Yeah.
Irrespective of what crisis hits us. And that's incredible to see prevalent as well, right? So I'm going to start with a couple of quotes, and I think, which is of course related to our current topic. One is from John Maxwell. And what it says is that, growth is the only guarantee that tomorrow will get better. So clearly, I think we will need to start doing things very, very differently. I mean, there is a disruption that's hit us, a bolt out of the blue, but we need to sort of keep moving for it. And there's another quote that's come from Gary Hamel, which says that the world is becoming turbulent faster, and companies are becoming resilient slower. So effectively, we need to move faster with the times, and all of that's going to, sort of clearly be very important. And we've seen enough and more sort of, WhatsApp posts about, the current crisis, impact, and how companies need to pivot really fast. And, one of the ones which has been very, very popular on social media has been the bridge on the river Choluteca,
yeah,
right, on Honduras.
Yeah.
We've seen various sort of, things coming about that you might think, you might plan, and I think people mentioned that as well, that you might plan for the best, but things will change and things will come and impact your business. But how are you pivoting and changing some of that as well? From our perspective, I think, Bhavesh, specific to the question that you asked, we are seeing that clearly from a consumer behavior sentiments perspective, starting Jan, Feb onwards, is when, transactions drop dramatically. And you're seeing this closer than we are as well in your business, is that increasingly people's spends on discretionary expenses have significantly reduced. So you see on our credit card, debit card, overall basis, most of these largest issuing banks that we have in the country, spends on cards reduced as much as 70 to 80%. So it was a big jolt for some of these companies. But the good news is that, again, to the spirit of resilience of Indians especially as well, right, and the world at large, is as things are opening up, sentiments have started to slightly bounce back. Now, the question is up in the air that, is this more sort of belted up demand that sort of happened from March till April, May, which is now sort of resulting into some upsurge in transactions? Or is it that, this is going to sustain for a while, that people have more or less said, we have reconciled, this is a reality now. BCG talks about an article I read about which says this is the new now. And you have to reconcile to that new now, right? And things have started sort of emerging back, and transactions have moved up to 70, 80% of what it used to be earlier. So things are getting better. But interesting insights to see that, there are specific categories. So if you talk about the top, say, 100 or 500 merchants in the country, and you see the transaction last year versus this year, you really realize that, things have changed. I mean, the merchant that used to be earlier prevalent in the top 500 have actually moved in now. So there are new categories like edutech, health tech, a new categories coming in completely. So there has been a shift in demand. There is clearly some result of transactions coming through. I think it's all for the better. And it's more about the fact that, you mentioned about, revenge travel, Bhavesh. And it's interesting to see that, while travel is a category which has been disrupted one of the most, despite that, you see, for example, drive holidays becoming more and more prevalent. So you may not do the international long haul trips, but you'll do things within the vicinity. So I think green shoots are emerging. This is only a matter of time, and time is healer. This too shall pass.
No, terrific, man. No, thank you very much for this insight. I think I can resonate with that. We are seeing that in financial services too. The only sad part here is people we want to lend, they don't want to borrow. People we don't want to lend want to borrow a lot more. So, small problem, but I'm sure we'll want to get away with that. I just want to jump in to Manish and just understand from Manish, because, we're middle left in terms of discretionary spends being lower. You are in a business, Manish, where you're driving loyalty. And when people are not spending enough, right? I'm not very, very sure how companies are looking at loyalty. Are they looking at people who spend more, or people who are actually being not spending enough? But how do you segment the market? So just give us your insight on the change in consumer behavior, and how do you see this behavior impact your own business, Manish, and maybe the industry as a whole?
Sure. Thanks, Bhavesh. So I think if I just step back and give you the context in which loyalty is looked at, more than ever today, loyalties and loyalty program are saviors for a lot of companies. If you see what is happening in the US, whether it is United, Delta, American, Lufthansa, British Airways, in Europe, most of these large organizations and large network carriers, they have actually carved their program out, created an asset, and borrowed funds against that to survive. Pretty much something similar what we did when Jet was there. We did a transaction by creating this separate business out. Loyalty and loyalty program is largely about customer data and customer understanding about that customer data. It has significant value provided you do it right. What I have seen, and I have been engaged in some conversation with different companies, everybody's talking to us to say, okay, what can we do where we can create some value? What is the value which we have? And I think the underlying essence in this is how much we know about our customers and our members, and how much data do we have. Creating a data ecosystem takes time. It's hard. And I'm talking first party data only here, largely purely because of the fact that there is significant value each one of us in their own company have with the first party data. It sits in different silos. The challenge is to bring that into a common platform, to weave it, to create a value out of it. And we in erstwhile Jet Privilege started this journey way back in 2014 by creating a separate business and creating a data ecosystem. So essentially, we are a data-led customer engagement platform, and started a journey to pivot this into multiple segments and multiple opportunities. So it was creating platforms which were specific to, let's say, travel, specific to air, specific to dining, specific to a particular category and shopping and like that, and which helped us to make our story and be more adaptable and agile in create a ecosystem. Using that today to kind of understand the customer behavior, what we have seen is you have to double down on loyalty. The customers who are there with you for so many years, there is the inherent value of trust, which is built. And trust is the biggest issue in this pandemic at many levels. Today, we don't trust anybody when we're going out. We need to be careful, and you need to be doing that. But how do we, as brands, leverage this trust with their customers and create an ecosystem in which they stay engaged? So what we realized that, yes, the travel is not the top of the mind, and travel is not going to be top of the mind for foreseeable future. We just concluded the survey with our members, and the results will be out. But headline numbers is the demand is going to be off by 50%. 50% of them don't want to travel for foreseeable future until we have a vaccine or something like that. Now, of that, even if you look at it for next 12 months, 50% are not likely to travel. So yes, there is going to be an impact. Now, how do we find where the customers are spending? To be able to do that, we had some underlying data ecosystem which will give us insight. So first was to stay relevant in this time, because we are a largely travel-centric brand, and we were in the process of creating different ecosystem on which we can engage with our partners. So we went out looking at what is happening in the data, and we found consumers, our members are looking for digital content. We're looking for inspiration from what to do, what's lying ahead, and also our portfolio of customers were spending on these categories, plus some other categories, which is largely the online shopping, etc. The spend was abnormally higher. Insurance as a vertical was also coming up. So what we realized is that we need to find ways in which we can create a value proposition and CVP which is relevant to them. So in the short run, we were engaging with our members on digital content. We sponsored TEDx Gateway seminars where people would log in, understand. We rewarded them. We rewarded members for staying indoors. And just recently, last week, we launched a new version of our app where members are actually getting rewarded for taking steps. So creating a healthy lifestyle, which is there. Now, this will give us rich data, which is going to be helpful to be able to create something which is useful. The opportunity lies in creating value out of the data and monetizing it in the right way. And I think there are different pockets which are there. So one size fits all will not work. There will be cohorts, and you have to find ways in which how you can do it. Now, Steps to Miles as an example which I gave, we started off with this idea in the month of June, and we launched it just last week. So in 2 months flat, we had this proposition out. Now, what will give us is we will get some information and figure out what's relevant from our members' perspective and create goal science and goal-based theories to say, okay, how is customers getting motivated in this environment and what will they do next? So we appeal to India One Stack. We are not a brand or a proposition which will appeal to the mass. So those who have the spending power and those who actually create the value. So from that perspective, our proposition is aligned to them. We just need to find the right hook to stay relevant.
Got it. No, thank you, Manish. I think travel, as we all know, is very hard hit. And from my perspective and what I understand it is, there is power of data. But at the end of the day, if the customer doesn't consume enough, right, you could pivot, but not sure if the revenues will come in, and companies will find it fairly difficult. And I just want to take this point in a very different context to Pramod, who obviously has a much, much broader spectrum to look at. And let's actually change this question on understanding the role of the CFOs and the senior finance professionals of how do you balance this challenge wherein maybe the company has to pivot, invest in technology. Many companies may not be as digital as they should have been, et cetera, et cetera. You need to invest a lot of in CapEx. There could be certain things that you so believe could be revenue generating, but you haven't tested. How does a decision-making framework in this environment will work or has worked in your perspective in the industry that you belong to?
You know, Bhavesh, that's an interesting question, pretty deep. The fact is how different companies and different CFOs react also depends on how well the companies do, and more importantly, in good times, what did you do? That will determine what capacity you have today to be adaptable and also drive business at the same time. Being adaptable, just being adaptable is not good enough. So I you know, when I was growing up in banking and then the industry, I heard a couple of times people talk to in forums like this. What do you do in bad times? And the answer is you actually do nothing in bad times. in the good times, you create discipline and don't leverage beyond your capacities. And we are in a time, it's unprecedented. See, when the situation started worsening, everyone thought in 2 months, I'll be back into business.
Yeah.
Cash flows will go back to normal. It's a short-term phenomena. Incidentally, I working in a global, I saw it coming 2-3 months ahead of time. You see, India was late, like in most other things, even in technology and things like that. We actually leapfrogged, and exactly what we did here. So, interestingly, when the COVID started hitting the Europe, interesting observation was people were planning to continue to work. So people started doing drills at that point of time in terms of how are we going to operate with 100% work from home. And fortunately, we took the coup and started preparing ourselves. Although at that point of time, India was nowhere in these pictures, in this league. Let me put it. So coming to that, and again coming to what we do in these times, or what can we do in these times, is limited unless you created that capacity in good times. So very simple. Now I belong to a infrastructure. I also sit on the board of Bangalore Airport, which actually is a big infrastructure, the biggest in South India right now. And what I see that the traditional industry is so uncertain about future has stopped spending. In fact, some of the projects that were being done are being put on hold or getting deferred. Obviously, the demand projections have also gone for a toss. And then we also see the part which is digitalization for us is doing exceedingly well. So companies are spending money where it matters. Slightly forward-looking companies which can afford actually are spending or shifting their spends from physical to digital, effectively making what they have more efficient. So that seems to be the focus right now. And recently, Siemens AG declared yesterday, in fact, day before yesterday, results, and results are not so bad for Q3 for us. And what is making that contribution is digitalization globally. So it's not just an India story, it's a global story. So I would say, first thing is be very disciplined in good times. That's your work. Don't let people run away with their imagination at that particular point of time. And when we did project finance, in fact, you would also know, we always believed the best time to invest is not at the peak of the business cycle, but at the bottom of the business cycle when it's very difficult to justify investment.
Yeah. So actually, Pramod, there's a saying in banks, and you would know it better, that bad debts happen in good times.
Exactly. We plan for bad debts in good times.
Yeah. No, terrific. Yeah. Thank you very much, Pramod. That's a very interesting insight. And I'll come back to you as we move forward. I just want to now go to Sunil and really understand, because your industry, while both on one hand, there is significant improvement on network, bandwidth, etc. Devices are obviously going through a slowdown. But in this point in time, Sunil, in your job as a CFO, again, piece of cost, right, versus growth. How do you make these decisions, right? Or how are you making the decisions that there is cash conversation is happening with the board? You're looking at cost with a microscope. And I have seen, at least in my experience, a lot of times, certain time when we hit with crisis, we end up taking certain very tactical decisions, which can have a very long-term impact when things become better. And you could then be falling behind the line. So tell us more about your industry and your experience on cost management and growth optimization. How are you striking that balance?
Thank you, Bhavesh. So just for the benefit of some of those listeners who may still associate Nokia with the handsets, just wanted to clarify that I belong to a company which only licenses its brand but doesn't manufacture handsets. So what do we do? So we are basically a telecom infrastructure company, and basis that I'm sure you may know prizes for guessing that we are a B2B company, and our customers are primarily the Vodafones and the Airtels and the Geos of the Indian world. And a lot which we do actually depends upon what our customers want us to do, which I think is pretty natural for almost all industries and all companies. But in our case, given the fact that we have a very small customer base, but very large customers, so we practically have to align our policies, processes, and whatever our decisions we take to the decisions which our customers would actually want to take. So let me just step back a bit and say, I mean, all of us, those of us who are actually fortunate and who have had very little disruption in terms of continuation of our work profiles, so working from office, shifting to work from homes, I don't know how much of us have realized that this was because of the fact that there was a digital connectivity ecosystem which was available in this country. That is something which I think perhaps has never been, or rather very, very infrequently been recognized. I mean, let us, just spend a few seconds to think that one fine morning, all of us started to use Wi-Fi big time from our respective houses. And how many of us actually face problems? I believe a very small fraction of the entire population actually faced anything which was different from what it would normally have been. So how did it happen? See, it actually happened because of the fact that, number one, there was huge capacities which fortunately were available in this country when nobody had thought about COVID and this disaster or this pandemic hitting us. But yes, there was a capacity which was available. But then it was also important that the capacity which was available was also usable, and it was made available to the consumers in a manner which was totally glitch free. Just a second, there's a question here. Okay. So, sorry for the distraction here. I just got a question on my screen. Okay, so what did the telecom companies do? So they basically asked us to ensure that there was seamless connectivity which was available to the consumers. And if you recall, there were many companies who actually went beyond their so-called scope of corporate duties, and they gave a lot of free time, to people who could not recharge. I mean, their connections were actually not cut. The data which was available to them was also made very flexible. However, to be able to do that, they had to rely upon people like us, whether it was a Nokia or it was a Ericsson. So what we actually did during these times was that we listened to the voice of the final consumer. So that is what ultimately makes the difference. And we gave temporary software licenses to most of these telecom companies so that they could kind of increase their scope and increase their bandwidth so that the entire country kind of, keeps on working from home, so to say. That was one thing which I would like to say. And the second piece is that for such a huge network to run seamlessly, it is also important that it is maintained regularly. Now we have a huge staff strength in this country. Out of a total of about 15,000 people who work for Nokia, about 5,000 to 6,000 are actually deployed in ensuring that the networks work or networks operate without any interruption. So that is what we call as maintaining the networks. Although given the technology which we have, about 70% of that can be done remotely. But there are about 30% of the cases where a physical on-site movement is required. And it is also a case where we have to do a lot of repairs, if I may kind of simplify the whole thing, a hardware repair or a kind of a board repair. So these are things which we as a company, with the help of our employees, and I must say that a lot of what we currently are and the situation in which we currently find ourselves is primarily to do not so much with the leadership, but with the kind of resilience which was showed by the employees. And I would give a lot of credit and a lot of gratitude to the staff which is working for us. Even during COVID times, there were people who actually risked their lives and ensured that the networks were working seamlessly, and the repair activities which happens in some of our state-of-the-art repair centers went about, maybe not in the same fashion, but at least in a fashion which made sustainability of the telecom networks a reality. Now, to be able to do that from our perspective, and I will come to your question about cost, etc., but I think this is very important, Bhavesh. And to be able to do that, it was important for us to be able to provide them the best possible safety precautions, which we could. I will not go into the details of them, but it was something which was, which I would say that I was also personally surprised, or rather pleasantly surprised, that we were able to provide them at such a short notice absolutely protective gears and governance perspective. So governance means also so that we could ensure that they were not putting their lives at risk. So what I'm saying is that in times like these, for companies to survive, it is very important for us to listen to the heart of the customer and listen to the heart of in our case, the final consumer. Because at the end of the day, it is not so much about the head as it is about the heart when it comes to addressing or kind of tackling pandemics like these. And now coming on to your other question about how are we controlling cost and what are we actually doing. So basically, the mantra across the company is think frugal. And when I say think frugal, what I mean basically is two things: conserve the cash, and then control the costs. I mean, I don't need to amplify to the audience here as to what do I mean by these things, but what I mean basically is that when it comes to conserving cash, we have to look at each and every stakeholder, which is important for any corporate. So starting with your customers, we have to ensure that we maintain a high customer engagement. I gave you enough examples of that. Then when you look at your vendors, because we also have a manufacturing setup here, and we had to ensure that our manufacturing went on seamlessly, subject to the lockdowns, and thanks to the government that we were designated as essential services, and we were able to kind of continue the manufacturing, maybe not in the same shape and form, but yes, at a much reduced rate, but still, we kept on with the manufacturing. And there you have to ensure that you have the right vendors on your side. So you have to kind of identify the crucial vendors. You have to ensure that that the crucial vendors are kind of paid on time. So a bit of ABC analysis also is required on a vendor perspective, much the same way as it is required even on the customer perspective. And lastly, just to, if I'm taking too much of time, Bhavesh, I will just try to kind of close my initial remarks. I think what is also important is that we have to make sure that when it comes to the employees, we have to ensure that they get the right amount of confidence. In all the discussions so far, we have not talked so much about the employees, and I would like to kind of maybe spend just about 30 seconds on that. We have heard a lot of people talking about layoffs, people talking about salary cuts, people talking about restructuring, compensations, etc. I mean, these are things which I think at least we have not given too much importance and attention to. What we believe is that it is extremely important for us to have a motivated workforce. They are under a lot of pressure in any case. I'm not saying that this will apply to all industries. We have been more fortunate than some of other industrial houses. We have been slightly much more fortunate, but I would say that rather than restructuring employees, rather than laying them off, it would be better if we can find some other ways and means, and we can talk about it in case there is time, in case time permits later on. And that is, I think, extremely important for companies like us to ensure that we have the third important piece when it comes to the stakeholder, which is the employees, well motivated and their morals are kept high. Thanks, Bhavesh.
No, thanks, Sunil. I think you stole my thunder of the employee part. I was to ask this question of Vivek, but thank you for giving me the segue to ask that question of Vivek. Thank you, Vivek, for listening to everybody else very, very patiently. Right? I'm sorry, in a panel of 5, there will be somebody who will speak first, and there will be somebody who will speak the last. So it is not by order. Vivek, I have this question of you, and I'm sure the fellow listeners will be very keen to know. You, in your role as a group CFO of Oryx, you have a lending business, leasing business, and lending business, and obviously you have the mobility business, etc. Tell us about. I have 2 or 3 different questions that you can choose to delve into. One, how do you manage the ecosystem, right? Because there is an ecosystem which is dependent on you as a company. You know, we've all been talking about us. How is our company, our entity being impacted, and what are we doing? But we are also dealing, in your business in particular, you are actually impacting through Oryx life of so many employees, you know, the drivers who drive cars, etc., etc., etc. Right? Tell us more about, from a cultural standpoint, how have you pivoted the organization pivoting directly in managing that? B, purely from the way you see this entire piece of digitization, I do understand it is not very easy for every organization to digitize, right? Work from home is being touted so much, but it's not very, very easy to be done. How have you gone, right? Or Oryx as an organization gone around really managing this change in behavior, cultural change in the organization? And was it challenging? And how do you see this really develop over the next couple of months and couple of years to come forward?
Sure. Thanks, Bhavesh. So, you know, Oryx as a company is actually a combination of very, very varied kind of businesses. And it is the same thing that we do worldwide. So if you look at the kind of businesses that Oryx does worldwide, they are absolutely varied. So we also run a golf course, we also run an airport, we also have a bank, we also have a mutual fund company, etc., etc. It is very similar for us here in India. So we, you know, so we are the largest car rental company in India. We are the second largest employee transportation company in India. We are also the largest leasing company in India, and we also run a lending business. So on the first question that you raised, Bhavesh, so yes, there is a very clear differentiation between the kind of businesses that we run and the kind of clients and the kind of employees that we have. And actually that is a cultural fit that we have been able to create over the past, you know, so now Oryx has been in India for the past 25 years. We have been doing car rental for over 20 years. And we have been doing leasing, you know. So the leasing business is more like a corporate banking business. Then the lending business is more like a retail lending business. And then the car rental employee transportation business is more like a logistics business. So from the standpoint of the policies, from the standpoint of the people, obviously the policies are similar for all the 3 businesses. But there is, you know, there is a very clear demarcation in terms of the people that work and the kind of skill sets that people have. And hence, from the point of view of the hiring and from the point of view of the compensation and stuff, you will find a very clear differentiation. What has happened to us during the pandemic is that, say, so the least impacted business for us is the leasing business, you know, because after the first couple of months, now the people have started buying cars. So that business is not impacted. We deal with the, you know, so we deal with the very large B2B clients. We are then not facing any kind of the NPA issues also there. After that, the business getting impacted is the retail lending business. That is both on the NPA side as well as on the sourcing side. Also one of, you know, and also one of the larger factor is the liquidity in that business. And I will just talk about liquidity in a bit. And then the business of the transportation that is largely depending upon people traveling or people going to office, that has been impacted also badly. So yes, all the three businesses have been impacted with varied kind of scales. In terms of challenges, there are a few challenges which are common to the three businesses that we run. So the challenge on liquidity or the challenge on the cost base being very high for the revenue structures that we have now is high. So that is a common challenge across the businesses. The challenge on the NPAs are more on the retail lending businesses. We don't have that challenges either on the transportation or on the leasing business. So as a package, I would say that the top 2-3 challenges that all companies in the industry are facing, which is to do with liquidity, which is to do with NPAs, and which is to do with the revenue growth, all our businesses in some shape and form have gotten impacted with that. The point that I would like to make here also is that when you are running a conglomerate that has varied kind of businesses, it is also an advantage in these times, because some of the companies that were in a unilateral kind of business are in slightly bigger trouble than we are, because for us, at least 50% of the business is actually not impacted. So that is at least one big thing that has happened for us, that while we run 5 businesses, so some of the businesses have got impacted, some of the businesses have actually not got impacted. On the margin, we can say that we are doing fine and we'll be able to survive this pandemic. On the people front, that is, and we are a very, very people friendly organization, and all the steps that we have taken in the past 7, 8, 10 years has been on those lines also. Such kind of the unforeseen circumstances has posed some challenges, and we had to take some actions on that account. That was obviously the last resort. We had done, so we had taken a lot of actions in terms of the vendor, at least in terms of the vendor renegotiations, in terms of the rental renegotiations, in terms of giving away the real estate that everybody else has done. We have taken a lot of steps on the liquidity side and have tried to bring down the cost of liquidity or the cost of funds at a substantial pace. And, also thanks to the shareholder, and also thanks to a AAA rating that we have, that has not been a challenge for us. People has been a sensitive subject. We had taken some action, but those have been brought to, the minimal level that we could. One of the learnings that has come, and I think, and at least I always go, and I always keep on going back to what happened in 2008 or what happened in 2013, and somebody touched upon that also, is that I think one of the mistakes that we realize as an organization, all of us commit, is that all of us are ready for growth. All of us are building infrastructure, so all of us build teams, infrastructure, processes for growth. What we are not ready for is failure, or what we are not ready for is a slowdown. And that is what has hit us. And that is what has hit, I think, most of the companies that I talk to. That is one of the largest factors that has actually impacted them. That we were all building for, that we have an economy that is growing at 7%, 8%, 9%, pick a number. And so hence I will be able to deliver a revenue growth of 10%, 12%. Hence I will be able to capacitize my people, assets, fixed assets, etc. on the basis of that growth rate. Nobody expected this. This is obviously an extreme kind of situation. But what this tells us now, and I think it is the same thing that taught the financial services way back in 2008 also, at the time when the subprime crisis happened, is that there has to be a backup plan. There has to be a plan B that is not only to do with growth, that is also to do with the lack of growth. And that is one point that I think, that is a very big learning from our standpoint. From the standpoint, on the point 2 that you actually raised from the standpoint of the work from home, etc., I think so the work from seamlessly happened for us. Almost 70 to 80% of our people who had to work from home were able to work from home. So, so the teams in the back office were able to get the connectivity. The teams who did not have the customer facing roles in the first couple of months, so they were able to work from home. Again, the critical point is that all the back office kind of work can happen, but when you are into, but when you are also into, say, a retail lending kind of a space, where the customer interaction becomes very important. Till the time you actually go and meet the customer, so the underwriting processes had to be altered a lot. So all those things were done So some part of work from home for the back office people and from, and for some of the other functions was happening. In case of car rental or in case of employee transportation, anyway, people were not traveling. So there was no concept of work from home. From the B2B businesses standpoint, we were able to at least close some deals while working from home. So that has been a big learning from, so at least from my standpoint, I was always a believer of the fact that work from home is not a successful model for companies like us. But now when we were actually pushed to the wall, I think, I think it worked out very well for all of us. So I would say that, that there have been a lot of learnings. There have been some stuff that has worked right. There have been some stuff that has actually not worked right for all of us. So that's my point.
No, thank you, Vivek. I think you touched upon very nice examples of what a company of your type is doing and can do. Just being conscious of time, I'll try to pose certain binary questions, or if I may say, I'll request the panelists if they can answer those questions in about a minute each, and I'll kind of go around putting those questions together. What Vivek was saying also really puts this point, and Pramod, I would like to seek your opinion because you've seen much broader spectrum, as I said, of things to happen. See, everybody's talking about digitization. Everybody's talking about, behavioral change. And I worry, and I'm sure we all do, are we risking a situation of excess capacity in the country, of real estate, right? Excess capacity of transportation, mobility, which is especially in businesses like what Oryx is in. Are we building excess capacity on liquidity? Because that's money, which nobody is consuming. And if we are building excess capacity, what could it do to the country in terms of its growth? Because I'm not very, very sure that CapEx will come into the play if you've got excess capacity on one side. Are we coming into a situation where we could have a very, very, very myopic growth, but a larger part of the country could be on excess capacity? And hence, how should companies pivot? And how should we look at those trends and really change before it hits us in our face, maybe 6 months down the line?
Just a second, there's something on the screen. I think the excess capacity in the private sector is one aspect of it. The Indian growth story. So let's leave aside what's happening. Otherwise, let's look at what is happening in India. Indian growth story hinges, and that's largely coming out of the government. Now, given what is happening on the liquidity support, given what's happening on the fiscal deficit front, the question is, when are we going to refocus back on these projects and start driving infrastructure supporting industries and the private sector that will bring confidence back into the consumer to buy things, to start spending. We talk about producer confidence, we must also speak about consumer confidence. And that's one cycle that has to start, and that will not start by taking small steps that we are taking today. So protecting employment, giving employment guarantees, it's more than guarantees, it's protecting and providing employment is very important for consumer confidence. You spoke in the beginning about people must buy from borrowed money, but who would buy from borrowed money if the confidence in future is not there? So that's a very important aspect that we have to very quickly refocus back. And our take within Siemens is this activity probably will start towards mid-21. Right now, there is firefighting. Fortunately, agriculture is doing well. That kind of demand is coming in. But what's the industrial demand requires regeneration of urban, semi-urban, and metropolises, where bulk of the middle class is. And that's where the confidence has to come in.
Got it.
So liquidity is there, and I think liquidity will continue to be there. Today, it's chasing mostly equity. We also see large ticket FDI. In fact, if you see the way the reserves with Reserve Bank of India have gone up, is primarily FDI. Although we hear from the equity markets, money is flowing out, but there is a large ticket FDI which is coming in. So if you see on the monetary front, we are okay. But question is, lending is not happening. Today, if you go into the market and want project finance, probably no bank is there. Yeah. So
somebody might look at you very, very surprisingly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, as if you were asking a question which was never asked in the last 100 years.
Yeah. And then when you look at it, where this reluctance coming from, it's because of demand for whatever is capacity is being created.
Yeah. So I just want to segue this question again to Milind. Milind, what Pramod is saying, and I completely agree. India's story was consumption and India's story was government spending, right? Consumption is not happening. So large part of the demand is much low. Government doesn't have the coffers to spend a lot more in infrastructure or create demand. So we are kind of in a situation wherein, we will be stuck with this piece. But I have a very different take to this to ask of you. From what you see and what you've seen in your experience, let's take 6 months forward. Right? You take 9 months forward. There is a lot of conjecturing happening on the vaccine, et cetera, et cetera. Let's take June, right, of next year. In your opinion, what could be a permanent change in consumer behavior, right? And what could it mean for companies at large, right, in terms of really readjusting? Could you give us some insight on that?
Sure, Bhavesh. I think, let me sort of answer this question in two ways, right? One is about the near term, here and now, and a bit of crystal ball grazing for the future as well. What will it look like in the future? So that's my version of it, but, we don't know how it'll all pan out, right? No one has an answer right now. But if you think about here and now, and you mentioned about, to your earlier question to Pramod as well, you were saying, what would companies do, for example, where it's CapEx heavy? There are huge investments made, and how are they sort of dealing with situations currently? There are some interesting examples that come to my mind, right? If you think about COVID crisis, and let's pick up two sort of companies that come from industries that we all know have been disrupted the most. One is hospitality, right? I mean, we know all of that, all of us know it. But it's interesting how hospitality companies, and one of the companies that comes to my name, because I know them really well personally, is Lemon Tree Hotels. For example, in Delhi, they overnight sort of brought in and sort of huddled up around it and created a hotel and a section focused on harboring people who are COVID or people who have come in from travel and things like that. So it's interesting that you had this huge cost, you had this huge infrastructure created, but you have to think in the short term, and you have to bring in that jugaad, if you want to get a word, to pivot really fast to a situation that otherwise believes that industry is fully disrupted. So one is, I would say, hospitality, and how today they've created all of this capacity to harbor and have people sort of create a business opportunity out of nothing, literally, right? Number two is, say, a company like Zomato. And Zomato has today responded by saying contactless delivery. What are they talking about? They're doing that largely to drive better consumer sentiments, give them more trust, give them more comfort, because all of us are really, really paranoid about what's going to come into our house. But they're responding that, and when we say these two companies have kind of responded to a certain situation, you can imagine the amount of insane work that's gone on to the back end to operationally support some of these assertions they're making to their customers. The other, of course, is the Indian typical entrepreneurial spirit, you call it. See the how they've responded to the face mask business, the sanitizers and things like that. Suddenly mushroom these new companies.
You can see it on the red light now.
Yeah, but I've got a friend of mine who's in the garment business has suddenly built a brand on face masks, and he's doing better business than he used to do earlier.
Yeah, if something gets sold, I'm sorry, I'm interjecting, Milind. Something gets sold on India's red lights, means it's really arrived in life, right? Right, it's really arrived. Masks and sanitizer are being sold at red lights.
Yeah. So I think, to bring in more better consumer sentiments, not only in the short term and in the long term as well. And I think, Bhavesh, in every adversity, there lies opportunity. And that's how we as Goals 101 are seeing this. Our pitch, what used to be before COVID, and our pitch, which is post-COVID, while the proposition remains the same, but the pitch changes because clearly for consumer sentiments and consumer expectations have moved as well. So today we focus a lot more on efficiency, on automation, on speed, on agility, and on building revenue lines that otherwise never existed. And that's what we are doing. So the thing is, as soon as you start touching a certain customer sentiment, which clearly is a latent need that's kind of built up given the current crisis, you suddenly see a new opportunity opening up. And we see that clearly, and our business seems to be very replicable, not only in India, but globally as well. So that's our response to a certain situation. How will things pan out? How will people behave? See, to me, I think, working from home is now a new reality. We all realize that. I mean, we are comfortable doing that. And none of us are worried about the fact that how will it impact productivity. And to our surprise, and, I think pleasant surprise, is that our productivity from a tech, data science, as well as engineering perspective has been the best and better than before. Maybe we're able to cut out all the riffraff in terms of those corridor conversations.
Chats and all of that stuff.
All the things that you had around the sort of tapris and things
and
like
unnecessary meetings.
Unnecessary meetings, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's very focused, very sharp, and you weeded out a lot of things. So to me, I think a lot that's going to change. People are going to be a lot more receptive. And to what you mentioned, Bhavesh, is that how people are sort of, in a way, also appreciating and recognizing that the fact that you are in your home environment and you can work. And that will have its own disruption on this whole co-working spaces, on commercial real estate, and all of that. But I'm sure co-working spaces will pivot and start becoming something else. Now, all of this thinking is already going through it. I still believe in the spirit of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial spirit of India. And I believe that domestic consumption will always drive and fuel the economy and continue to do it. We are a population of 1.3 billion people. We will consume. There will be short-term glitches, but I think I'm very optimistic about the future, and people will pivot and change their models and still be relevant given what the situation at that point in time. So that's my take.
Terrific. Wonderful. I'm sorry, gentlemen, we have limited time. So I'm going to take some polls if you guys are fine. I'll go around and ask a question and let's see what's your poll answer to that. Does that work? Right?
Sure.
Okay. So the first question, do you think India is going to be at the forefront of digital change once COVID kind of is done and dusted? Right? Let's start, Pramod, with you, and we can go to Milind and then Vivek and Sunil and Manish.
Not the forefront. We are a good runner, but not at the forefront.
Not at the forefront. Okay.
Yeah.
Milind?
I'm very optimistic. I think adoption is greater with smartphones, with internet penetration, thanks to Sunil and team, technology and telecom backbones. Look at what's happened in UPI. It's a revolution, right? Today, my driver sends, money transfers money to his family through a simple SMS. So I think I'm very optimistic. So I think adoption.
All right. Okay. Is 1-1. Vivek?
No, I don't think so. So we will be good. We will definitely be better than what we are. And we have the population numbers to back. We have the population numbers to back the demand. But in terms of the technology, I don't think that we'll be at the forefront.
Okay. Sunil, 2-1. I'm in your camp, Milind, so it's 2-2. Yes, Sunil.
Let me add to that number then, Bhavesh. I think
I would actually turn in and say where we touch people at the margin, we are much better. Even today, we are much better.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. But when it comes to the industrial side, there's going to be an issue.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yes, Sunil. Sorry, you were saying something.
No, what I was saying was that, well, yes, just recall as to what happened after the demonetization. And that was an event which lasted only a couple of weeks or whatever that time frame was. I don't even recall that. And just imagine, the vastness of this particular event, and I think you will have the answer.
Yeah. All right. So it's 3-2. So Manish, it's either you can tie or you can make us win. But I'm sorry, I can't be biased but I'm digital by heart.
So I think in the long run, yes, India will be in the forefront of digital, purely because of adoption and purely because the population is our size, and that what has happened now is going to be continued going forward, in my belief. Even after, during the pandemic, and we are still in pandemic and post-pandemic as well. But what's going to happen in this is we will not be the innovators, but we will be the adopters, number one. Number two, I think we still have to find ways to make money. The challenge is India 1, which is 35 to 40 million household, which contributes to almost 1.9 trillion, 1.7 or 1.9 trillion dollars of economy. The balance household do not. The question is, how do we balance this time versus money equation to make digital more effective to make money in digital businesses? So I think that's going to be the key challenge going forward, which I see.
Okay.
Digital adoption is no doubt about it.
All right. So we win. Sorry, guys. Sorry. I just wanted to declare the win. Okay, I'm just joking. Second question, 2 of 3. What do you believe on this entire thing on the migration of workforce from urban to rural, right? Do you think it will reverse to pre-COVID level, or is this going to be largely, I'll not use the word permanent, but do you think it will be largely 30-35% back to urban, right? A lot of people are saying that demand will shift to rural and semi-urban because so much of migration, etc. Right? Manish, let's start with you. What do you think about it?
What's your time frame?
Take 1 year. I'm saying post-COVID, 1 year from now.
So we are assuming that COVID is going to be done and dusted by a year.
I hope. Okay. Otherwise, we'll have multiple webinars.
Okay, I think. So I think I would suggest that at least a large portion would be back.
Will be back. Okay.
Will be back because human tendency. You need to grow. You need to make yourself prosperous, and you will not find that unless jobs are created, and that's going to require significant capital investment, which I think the cycle is delayed.
Okay. All right. Sunil, what do you think?
Yeah. So Bhavesh, I think the reversal has already started to kind of take shape, and I am telling you by my personal experience. You know, there are people who have actually started to move back. So the contractors, some of the prominent contractors have started to deposit monies into the bank accounts of their skilled workers so that they can start to come back. And the reason why I would say so, and just 5 seconds more, is that I think we have now reached into a stage where we have the pandemic, but we have reached a stage of acceptance, so to say. And that is exactly what some people were talking before we started. Well, just that the hotels are 70% full, etc. So the risk has actually not gone away. The risk has increased, but the acceptance has taken shape.
All right, Vivek. So it's 2-0. Vivek.
So I think that the people will have to come back, and the reason is that the motivators for the, because the motivators that were there for the people to actually go out of, to actually go out of their small towns and come to the larger cities, that was to do with, the better jobs, better life conditions, better facilities. All those things will continue to remain. So they had obviously gone back because they had no option, but I think that people will move back.
Okay. All right. Milind?
I agree. I tend to agree with them, everybody. That, they came in here for a reason. I think the top 8 cities contribute to almost 70-80% of economic activities. And if they were to come back and start building a good livelihood, they will need to come back and start. So I don't see that to be a challenge, Bhavesh. It's just a matter of time.
Okay. All right, Pramod?
Well, I can't change the poll in any case. See, I think what Sunil said is currently we are in a situation where almost 80% people are back already. So we look at the work side.
Belongs to that 20%. Sorry,
yeah,
I was just joking. I said my driver isn't. Yeah. So he still belongs to 20%. I'm wondering.
Yeah, but you see, lots of us have not permitted part-times and all to come in. But that aside, the construction worker, the factory workers, about 80% are back. I can give you people who were working at Bangalore airport before pre-COVID. When the transportation opened up, trains, I believe it fell down to 6,000. As much as that. And now we are back to about 13,000-14,000.
Terrific. Last question before I hand it over to Deepak. Which of these 3, and you can stack rank them as industries, are going to be the most disrupted because of COVID. Disrupted positively, negatively, no. It's actually just disrupted, in my opinion, more positively. Education, financial services, hospitality, right? Sunil, will start with you. Just stack rank them 1, 2, and 3. Hospitality, education, and financial services.
I mean, sorry, was the question that they would be most disrupted or
most disrupted? Most disrupted in stacking. Okay, like you may say, okay, financial services will be most disrupted, followed by this, followed by that.
Well, I think hospitality is the one which is currently the most disrupted, and it could remain in that situation for a long time to come, depending upon how the leadership behaves. Followed, I would say, by education and then financial services.
Okay.
There could be a tie between the last two as well. Subhavesh.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, it's interesting poll, right? Let's hear Vivek. What about you? What do you think? What's the stack rank?
So Bhavesh, I think education will be the so education will be the top one, but that is going to be a positive disruption, I think, and we are already seeing a lot of changes on that account. Financial services, there would be some short-term disruption, but may not be in the long term. Hospitality, I don't see a lot of disruption happening there.
Okay, that's interesting. All right, Milan?
I think to me, I would rank it like financial services and education clearly. I mean, in terms of positive impact, and hospitality, I think it will sort of take a while for them to creep back to earlier levels. But to me, I think all of them will come back to very normal stages. But if you see positive impact and the beta that we will generate out of the current crisis, to me, financial services will be thriving just by virtue of automation, digital adoption, etc., etc. Penetration is going to grow. And number two, of course, edutech, and we've seen the impact of edutech and how it's touching the lives at a grassroots level. But I still believe, from an education standpoint, currently we're doing it because we're tied over a current crisis. I think the physical and the face-to-face education, which happens in terms of regular colleges and schools, will come back to normal. You cannot sort of replace that any time.
All right.
Okay. Normal, but to me, these two are going to be very positively impacted. So, yeah.
Interesting. Pramod?
I put financial services at the top, education, and then hospitality. Hospitality, I think, will come back. Financial services may not be so positive. My view is it's going to be disrupted rather because the second phase of COVID effect will come in and will bring in lots of delinquencies. I believe that that's going to be the defining moment in terms of boys versus men.
Yeah. Collection business is going to thrive. That's a new private equity favorite, in my opinion. Set up a collection. Milan will talk. Let's set up a collection services business. So last word to Manish, to you. People are not giving hospitality a lot of flavor. So I thought, let me ask you, what's your take in the stack ranking?
I think I tend to agree with Pramod. Financial services, edtech. Edtech is basically a phenomena of phase. People will go back to a face-to-face classroom. Hospitality, until the COVID, there will be some disruption, but hey, come on, we are all social animals. We love to step out, go. That spirit of human mankind cannot be disrupted with this pandemic. It will be back. And I don't think, whatever said and done, you can't create a discotheque in your room and party with your friends and get the
never know. You never know. We did that yesterday. I can tell you, right? So offline, I can talk about it. We did that yesterday.
Right. There will be some newer models which will come where you order a chef and come, he makes something in your place. That certainly can be.
Tappanyaki. Yeah, that's already there. Tappanyaki. Yeah.
Yes. But by far sure, I think people going out and stepping out and having a good time is going to be back. We just need that confidence that everything will be safe.
I agree. The best view is when you get is after a difficult climb. I think our climb is difficult, but I'm sure we're going to get the best view once this climb is done and dusted. So thank you, gentlemen. It's been very interesting. I learned a lot. I'm sure the listeners did. And we had, in my opinion, a fairly open conversation. Would have loved to really continue this conversation a much longer period of time. We were just getting warmed up to the excitement. But thank you very much. I hope we connect again, and hand it over back to Deepak for the concluding remarks and the question and answer session. Thank you, everyone, again.
When everybody smiles on a panel, it only means that it was an outstanding discussion. Everybody enjoyed. So, but Bhavesh, I must compliment you're a great speaker, and you should write a book someday. And if that thought hasn't come to your mind, I think you should start thinking about it.
I can't. No, so it'll be a digital book, right? So memories of various webinars.
So we will help you to get it.
I thought Bhavesh was going to say it's going to be a podcast.
It will be a podcast.
Wonderfully moderated, I must say.
No, thank you, Deepak. I think the panelists are very kind of really participating.
Milan, Manish, Sunil, Pramod, Vivek.
Deepak, so we are losing you. I'm not sure, is it me or is it everybody else?
I think
we are not able to hear Deepak.
I think we have lost.
Milan, Manish, Sunil, Pramod, Vivek, outside conversation. Really. Can you guys hear me now? Am I audible now?
But it's kind of,
am I audible now?
A bit correct. Yeah,
Slightly better, Deepak.
Bit off and on. Yeah.
Okay, so let me keep making an attempt. So I was actually thanking everybody, and just a thought that while we are dealing with unknown, I think what came out of the entire conversation was that let's emerge stronger by how do we respond to the crisis, how do we respond to the ecosystem, and how do we also renew ourselves. So I think that's the kind of a takeaway which I will take it from the conversation. And as I said in the beginning of it, that CEO Lounge is just not about knowledge. It is also about knowing our speakers a little bit more, because you all have huge fan following. People want to become like you. So it is also good to know a little bit more about what you do otherwise, other than work. And probably I'll start with Milan. And Milan, is there a special love for dogs? Is that something which is part of your life?
I'm sure Sandeep gave you some tips on that.
No, I didn't get back from Sandeep. This is something which is known to everyone. So, but
well, I think that when we talk in the family as well, I think we couldn't have asked for anything better during this current crisis situation, right? When everyone's kind of cooked up into the home, you are sort of stuck in one single sort of a closed doors or in a house. I think pets or dogs or just really pets at large, I think brings a lot of joy and happiness. I mean, it's like having a kid permanently in the house, right? And they're great. I think for me, every time I see my pet, at least, it's downtime. I mean, that 10 minutes rejuvenates you again, because you just see all the happiness on his face and things like that. But to me, yes, big dog lover. And I'm happy to have, his name is Milo in the house right now, and really sort of, break the clutter you have in the head. Yeah.
Excellent. We would love to see his picture with you, Milan. If he's around, call him. Maybe love to see you hugging him. Yeah. Manish, music, is that something that refreshes you? And what kind of music?
Sufi music. I would love to wind down end of the day with some music, which I listen pretty much almost every day. And I must tell you, during the lockdown period, we have a group of music lovers. We connected with a lot of artists in a private setting, and we had the singing session happening over Zoom, and it was fun. So 1.5 hours every day during the lockdown was well spent.
Wonderful. So can we put you on a spot, Manish, and ask you to sing a couple of lines for us? The best way to.
I'm a good connoisseur to listen to music, not necessarily sing.
Next time you should invite us over for these concerts.
Yeah. Sure.
Sunil, I learned that you also associated with one of the NGOs in Udaipur, and would love to hear a bit on how's that NGO contributing to the community. Let's hear briefly about that.
Okay, I am actually impressed by the fact that you were able to find that out somehow somewhere. But yeah, so I was not anymore, but I was associated with an NGO called Seva Mandir. It is based out of Udaipur, and it was just that. Just a matter of chance that we had gone for a corporate, what is it called, corporate trips to Udaipur, and I happened to, just by coincidence meet old class fellow of mine, and she happened to be the chief executive of Seva Mandir at that moment of time, and that's how I kind of got associated with that NGO. Although my involvement was more from the perspective of the specialization which I bring in terms of kind of advising them on fundraising, which because that is the biggest bottleneck which any NGO faces. It is not about work, it is not about execution, because as we have heard, Indians are kind of pretty, I would say, enthusiastic when it comes to things like this, but when it comes to raising funds, that is the kind of biggest hurdle which is there. So I kind of help them on certain ideas. However, from coming to your specific question, this NGO actually works in some of the rural areas in and around Rajasthan, about 1,000 villages, and they do all kinds of work in terms of educating farmers, educating children, women, anything and everything you could even think of. And they are, as far as I know, one of the biggest suppliers of clothes to Fab India. So they have a weaver's guild, and they are one of the biggest vendors of classic Indian clothes to Fab India.
Interesting. Very, very nice. Pramod, a long corporate journey with Siemens, and if you allow me to ask you, what makes this company so special that made you stick for such a long period of time?
Yeah, okay. 20 years I worked with Siemens. Before that, I was about 10 years with Deutsche, and before that with Indian Bank. I think there are many things actually that works for the company is the delegation or the trust they put in people is enormous. It's sort of culture. Yeah, so effectively, if you start working, and for me, the other thing was technology. Although I don't have that engineering or technical background, but lots of my financing and association was with technological development. So here you had a chance for me to look at the technical side and the financial side and actually see an asset come up. That's very rarely we see from the financial services, where you basically work on both sides. And the other thing, of course, is for people. It's huge amount of delegation and trust that's placed. So almost anyone can technically go and own up whatever they want to do. So I think in that term, the other firms that I worked to an extent, but here it's much more.
Wonderful. If I could just generally ask, is this the toughest corporate challenge that you've seen in your corporate life, this pandemic that you're going through? Is this the toughest period ever in the corporate life that you've seen through?
Fortunately, working in Siemens, no. That's again a question of how you, a topic that we touch actually, how you behave in terms of good times and how you plan out your balance sheet. In fact, this is one company which closed the M&A for about 15 billion euros 3 days ago for healthcare. It's already financial close achieved. Great. To that extent, yeah. A company which announced carve out of biggest chunk, which is the energy, is on track by September. That will happen through COVID. So it's the strength the company displays precisely based on its technology, but most on the financial equipment.
Wonderful. So you had a right place, that I could say.
Yeah. So I've not lost a night's sleep. Let me put it that way. Yeah.
No, we only wish that you never do that, sir. And Bhavesh, I love listening to you, and let me be very honest. You just were flowing in a conversation, and that was really fun. And maybe You could share some more stuff. What's been happening in these last work from home scenario for you? What have you really been busy other than work? Paytm's been a new journey. How did the company welcomed you and so on? Love to hear this. Maybe you could spend a couple of minutes talking about it.
No, so financial services has been tough. I was in the middle of 2008 crisis in a bank, India's largest retail bank, then ICICI, and I was running branches then, right? So I saw it in my face because of what was happening with people withdrawing money and all that stuff, etc. Mm-hmm. This is unprecedented, right? It is unprecedented from every stretch of imagination, because you were seeing regulatory action happen every second, third week, and that puts people talk about moratorium. Digitally delivering moratorium is tough, right? But we delivered digitally, and making teams really put the website up for people to apply, get the moratorium, understand their interest, how much will they pay and not pay, because it was a very emotional decision for people getting into moratorium, right? Kyunki le lete, free ka hai. No, it's not free. There's going to be cost to it. And then moratorium 2.0, now restructuring. So I think we've been very, very busy managing the balance sheet, managing liquidity, managing regulatory environment, and in fact, managing customer emotions. Because customers are going through, so as bankers, you see the customers' good and the bad side, right? Unfortunately, COVID made us see the bad side, be it a large corporate, because in my previous organization, I was involved, we were lending to large corporates, to the small guy on the ground. And this has hit everybody. Right. So there is nobody I can saying, look, it's not hit me. It's hit everybody, and everybody needs help. And I think it was kind of a humbling experience that you could make impact to people by giving them what they wanted, by giving them more money when this entire 20% guarantee scheme from the government came out, and disbursing loans. The government is guaranteeing to disburse loans to small businesses, etc., where people are sending Twitter messages, thanking us and saying, you know what, this is a lifesaver. How quickly you could give us money, etc., etc., etc. So I think one has been tremendously busy, but at the same time, it has also made me realize that it's time to pivot again, that tech-led and lending is going to become 10x of what it is today. And there is not going to be too much business around physical world that we were very so used to. And hence, my decision to move came in from that perspective, though I set up the company from day one with the last 3.5, 4 years. And yeah, it's been, I think none of us have ever joined a company over a video conference in COVID times, right? So induction on COVID, documentation on COVID, running the company on COVID, doing everything from home. So yeah, it's terrific. But I'm a student of technology, though I'm a completely a management financial services graduate. But I can tell you what tech can do is unprecedented. Right, is unprecedented. And I just hope that the country like India can actually pivot from what it's done on payments to what it can do on lending, right? And I call it lending for spending. If we can get into lending for spending model using payments, which is spending, and lending, which is credit, I think India is poised to be amongst the top countries which would have done that. So I'm really loving it. I'm just loving the opportunity. Yeah.
Wonderful. Wish you a great journey with Paytm, Bhavesh. Vivek, we've kept you for the last. You are a Salman Khan of the corporate world. Yeah. Don't worry, we won't ask you to remove your shirt because you've been sitting with your biceps.
My goodness,
bulging out.
Yeah, and we don't want to get more embarrassed about what we are not or we can't do. But I must tell you, Vivek, you have really been an inspiration for many of us here, and I can really talk about myself. I really enjoy seeing your videos, exercising, doing those push-ups, and see that if we can also do something around this. We also know that you're a great sportsman. You're a fantastic bowler. We've seen you doing that. You're a fearsome guy on that front. But other than the sports and exercise, what is it that also excites you in life? Because Sandeep says that you're no more a munim. You're in a wrong profession. So I want to go beyond the sports and exercise. What's there in your life?
So definitely. things like fitness and sports are definitely my passion, and and now I have been doing it for some time now, and one of the largest things that work for me there is that it's actually less to do with the body but more to do with the mind. So whether it is say an early morning gym session after so after probably a bad flight in the night, or after a bad day at work, etc., or even so if I've got a board meeting today morning, I would try to do the gymming part of it before that, because that keeps me sane. So I think it is actually, so it is to do with the physical fitness. Definitely, it's more to do with the sanity of the mind. And I think so. I have seen a different kind of things work for different people. So some people want to run, some people want to jog, some people want to play, some people want to work out. So fitness is definitely very important for me. In my free time, I also write a lot. I write a lot, and that is very, very unlike.
What do you write, Vivek?
So I write a lot of poetry, Deepak. But so someday I would want to publish it, but I think it is many, many years later. So besides my work, family, and fitness, I think so. So basically these are the things that I love to do.
So Vivek, this is not coming from me. It's coming from Milan and Bhavesh and Manish and Pramod and Sunil, that you must end this entire webinar with a small few lines of the poetry that you probably have written across here.
So I think you have put me in a spot, Deepak. But so I would recite something that is not mine, because because that is to do with the subject that we are talking about, and it goes that रख हौसला कि वो मंजर भी आएगा, रख हौसला कि वो मंजर भी आएगा, प्यासे के पास चलकर खुद समंदर भी आएगा, रख हौसला कि वो मंजर भी आएगा, प्यासे के पास चलकर खुद समंदर भी आएगा, ना हार के बैठ है मंजिल के मुसाफिर, ना हार के बैठ है मंजिल के मुसाफिर, की मंजिल भी मिलेगी और चलने का मजा भी आएगा.
Wow.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. Fantastic Saturday morning, great conversation. And to all the audience, thank you for being so patient, and a lot of questions. We'll try answering them during the course of the week if they're not being still answered. And I look forward to seeing you all. We're taking a break on the next Saturday. The Saturday after that with a new set of leaders on a new topic, with an objective and agenda of restarting again, in a best way. Until then, take good care of yourself, stay healthy, stay safe, and wishing everyone a very happy Independence Day in advance. So thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.